When we look at survival stories, there's always that one burning question that comes up.
Yeah, how do you actually keep going when absolutely everyone around you is just giving up?
Exactly. And today, we are going to look at a literal survival guide for that. It's actually hidden inside a recent Sunday message from our church family here in Swindon.
Right, and it answers exactly how to survive a 40-year,
Yeah.
wilderness period when the majority of people simply quit.
It's so relevant. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are going to extract the key takeaways from a genuinely fascinating primary source. It's a sermon titled, Give Us That Same Spirit, which was delivered by Pastor Malcolm Macqueen on July 19th, 2026 at KCC AoG Church in Old Town, Swindon.
And, even though this was preached back in July, it feels so incredibly relevant for us right now, especially as we head into the busy Christmas season and we're reflecting on the year.
Oh, completely. And we aren't just looking at the transcript today, are we?
No, we actually have the presentation slides used during the delivery, which are, well, they're remarkably evocative.
Yeah, the imagery is great.
It really is. The title slide, for instance, features this striking silhouette of a man with his arms raised against a brilliant sunrise.
Which kind of sets a tone of expectation, right?
Yeah, expectation, but it also really hints at the sheer exhaustion of having to stand your ground.
Yeah.
When the environment is hostile, the resources are scarce, and the psychological toll is just mounting day by day.
Right, which is honestly exactly where we find you, the listener, today. I mean, think about your own wilderness moments.
Yeah, everyone has them.
Exactly. Maybe it's a career that is just totally stalled out, or a chronic health issue, or a period where you feel completely culturally alienated.
Yeah, those seasons are tough.
They really are. So we are going to unpack how two historical figures, Joshua and Caleb, possessed four unique characteristics that kept them going through an actual literal desert wilderness.
But before we get to the survivors themselves, the sermon's title, Give Us That Same Spirit, refers to a baseline we really have to establish first.
Right, the foundation.
Exactly. Pastor Malcolm draws this from a New Testament verse, 10 Timothy 1.7. And he doesn't just, read the verse. He visually breaks it down on a slide using three distinct icons.
Because he argues that you cannot survive a wilderness using just human willpower, right?
Right. This isn't about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. He describes the spirit mentioned in the verse as a heavenly resource.
A heavenly resource. I like that.
Yeah. So the slide shows an arm, which represents power, a heart, representing love, and a brain representing a sound mind.
Let's actually sit with those three for a second, because I feel like this completely shifts the paradigm of how you or I might normally face a crisis.
Oh, 100%. Usually our first instinct is totally just self-reliance.
Yeah, exactly. But Pastor Malcolm defines power in this context as relying on a God who is, he calls it overqualified to help.
Overqualified. That's such a great way to put it.
It really is. It's an active shift away from your own limitations.
It is a radical shift. And then he moves to love, which is, well, arguably even more difficult.
Oh, definitely.
Because he is not talking about sentimental, warm and fuzzy love here. He defines this as doing the impossible, loving your enemies.
Wow, yeah. Doing good to those who use or persecute you.
Exactly. He outright tells the congregation that if you try doing that in your own human strength, especially when you are already exhausted by the wilderness, you will fail.
Right. You just don't have the capacity.
No, you don't. It absolutely requires that external heavenly resource.
Which brings us to the third icon, the brain, which he calls a sound mind. He describes this as experiencing calmness rather than jumping straight into panic mode.
And panic mode is our default, isn't it?
Oh, totally. Living in panic mode, to me, feels like when my laptop CPU is running this massive, terrifying background program.
Oh, yeah, and it just constantly drains your battery, overheating the whole system until you eventually just crash.
Exactly. So Pastor Malcolm's concept of a sound mind is essentially hitting the hard reset button to factory settings. It just kills that background panic program so you can actually function.
That's a really helpful analogy. What stands out in the sermon text here is how Pastor Malcolm emphasizes the tense of this verse.
What do you mean?
Well, God has already given this spirit to believers. It's not a future promise you have to beg for. It's a present reality.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, he says it's the very life of Jesus being worked into a person by the Holy Spirit. And that just totally changes your posture, right? From pleading in the wilderness to actually utilizing the tools you already hold in your hands.
Okay, so if we take that baseline, that we have access to this reset button that gives us a sound mind, what does operating with that actually look like in the real world?
Right. practically speaking.
Yeah. This is where the sermon points us back to the church in the wilderness. We're talking about the historical exodus of the Israelites from Egypt.
And out of hundreds of thousands of people, there were only 2 graduates over the age of 40 who survived that entire 40-year wandering to actually enter the Promised Land.
Just 2, Joshua and Caleb.
Yep. Which brings us to the first of the 4 unique characteristics that set those 2 men apart. According to the sermon slides, that first characteristic is faith.
Faith.
But Pastor Malcolm doesn't just leave faith floating around as some abstract, religious concept. He asks, practically, where does it come from?
Right. How do you get it?
Exactly. He outlines 3 distinct sources from their history. First up is hearing.
And we aren't talking about hearing a nice, inspirational TED Talk here.
Far from it. He points to Deuteronomy 4.36, reminding the church that the Israelites literally heard the terrifying, audible voice of God speaking out of a massive fire.
Just incredible.
Yeah, it was this earth-shattering, visceral experience that Moses said made him exceedingly fear and quake. It was just raw exposure to the divine.
So hearing that level of power is the first source. The second source is seeing. Pastor Malcolm goes through this wild list of what they physically witnessed with their own eyes.
The visual evidence is just staggering.
It really is. I mean, they saw the 10 plagues in Egypt, rivers turning to actual blood, swarms of flies, total darkness.
Yeah.
Then, out in the desert, they saw a pillar of cloud guiding them by day, a pillar of fire by night. And they drank from a rock that literally followed them to give water, which the preacher notes, from a New Testament perspective, was a manifestation of Christ.
Right. It is just an overwhelming portfolio of visual, miraculous evidence. You would think that seeing the laws of nature repeatedly suspended on your behalf would permanently cement your faith.
Okay, wait, I have to push back here, though.
Yeah.
Because Pastor Malcolm himself makes this incredibly humorous, but honestly kind of tragic observation about the manna.
Oh, the miracle bread.
Yeah, the bread that literally fell from the sky every single morning. He points out that the Israelites actually got bored of seeing this daily miracle.
They really did.
He jokes that they wanted a new international version or an ESV version of the manna.
Which is such a funny way to put it.
It's brilliant. Treating their daily supernatural breakfast the same way we might treat different modern translations of a book when we just want some variety. They wanted to bake it, grind it, do anything to change it up because they were sick of the original version.
Yeah.
So my question is, if they're literally eating miracle bread every day and they still complain, it almost makes it sound like seeing a miracle doesn't actually work to sustain faith long term.
You've hit on the exact tragic irony of the Exodus story. And it is a psychological reality that Pastor Malcolm addresses head on. Human nature adapts, right?
Yeah, I guess it does.
The spectacular just becomes mundane after a while. His answer to your question is a definitive no miracles don't bring maturity.
Wow. Okay.
He even references the biblical story of the rich man and Lazarus, pointing out that even if someone were to rise from the dead, it wouldn't be enough to convince a heart that just isn't willing to listen.
Right, because seeing the spectacular doesn't automatically create that deep, sustaining faith.
Exactly. And that is exactly why the third step in this process is the most crucial of all. Remembering.
Curating the spiritual memory.
Yes, exactly. And Pastor Malcolm uses a very modern practical analogy here. Think about getting a new laptop computer. If you don't periodically clear the cache...
Oh, right. You have to delete the junk files, the old activity logs, the background bloatware.
Precisely. If you don't press that delete button, the whole machine becomes totally sluggish.
Yeah.
Pastor Malcolm applies this directly to the mind. He says we have to actively delete past grievances. Praise God for forgetfulness is his exact phrasing.
I love that. Praise God for forgetfulness.
Right. You have to delete the bitterness of what someone said to you 20 years ago. If you carry that old information, you slow down your spiritual operating system. But conversely, you must fiercely hold on to and remember the spiritual victories.
Because remembering the right things is the only way to build the confidence required for the future. Okay, so we have this foundation of a sound mind that allows us to build faith through hearing, seeing, and heavily curating our memories by deleting the junk and saving the victories.
Yeah, that's a foundation.
And once you have that, it triggers a chain reaction. According to the sermon's logical flow, faith births the second characteristic of survival, vision.
And biblical vision, as he defines it by referencing Hebrews 11.1, isn't just about, projecting a desired future.
Right.
It is the ability to actually see the invisible. It believes for the incredible and receives the impossible. To illustrate how memory creates this kind of vision, Pastor Malcolm uses a stunning historical example, and he doesn't even use Joshua or Caleb for this one.
Oh, who does he use?
He uses the story of Rahab.
Ah, the Rahab effect. This is such a fascinating psychological case study.
It really is. Rahab was a woman living in Jericho, which was a heavily fortified enemy city standing directly in the way of the Israelites. When the Israelite spies came to her house, she didn't react with the sheer panic that had completely gripped the rest of her city. Why? Because she remembered.
Wow.
She told the spies that she remembered a story from 40 years prior, the story of the Red Sea parting for the Israelites.
Think about that. That is a 40-year-old memory of a miracle she didn't even personally witness. She only heard about it through the grapevine.
Yeah, yet she curated that memory, and because she held on to that specific mental file, it birthed a vision in her.
Amazing.
She had the vision to hide the spies and, as instructed, to hang a red cord out of her window as a sign of her faith that her household would be saved when the city inevitably fell. That single act of vision eventually made her an ancestor to King David and Jesus.
Wow. So let's look at the mechanism here. How does a curated memory actually change your visual perception of a threat?
Good question.
Because vision in this context isn't like a corporate CEO's 5-year business plan. It's more like putting on night vision goggles in pitch darkness. You see a reality that is completely invisible to the naked eye.
That's a great way to picture it.
Think about Joshua and Caleb. They went into the promised land as spies alongside 10 other men. All 12 of them saw the exact same physical reality. They saw the heavily fortified cities. They saw the literal giants living in the land.
Yeah, the evidence was the same for all of them.
Exactly. The 10 spies looked at those giants and saw themselves as grasshoppers. But Joshua and Caleb, wearing their night vision goggles, fueled by their memory of God's past victories, didn't view themselves as grasshoppers at all.
This is where memory provides a comparative baseline for your brain. If your brain remembers the Red Sea parting, it categorizes a fortified city not as an impossible threat, but as a comparable challenge.
Right, it shifts the scale.
Exactly. And this is the exact dynamic at play in the story of David and Goliath, which the preacher also weaves in. When David looked at Goliath, he didn't see an unbeatable, massive giant. He saw an uncircumcised Philistine.
Yeah, his perspective was completely different.
Why did his vision differ so drastically from the rest of the terrified army? Because David remembered his past, private victories where he defeated a lion and a bear to protect his sheep.
The brain says, I beat a lion with God's help. This giant is just another obstacle. Vision, birthed by memory, literally rescales your obstacles. It shrinks the giant down to a manageable size, not by denying the giant exists, but by magnifying the power you're bringing to the fight.
Which is just a brilliant psychological reframing, but having vision isn't quite enough, right?
Right. I mean, I can put on the night vision goggles and see the giant clearly, and I can tell myself it's a manageable threat, but that doesn't mean I actually have the guts to walk out onto the battlefield.
Exactly.
So how does a sermon bridge that gap between just seeing the reality and actually having the stomach to face it?
Well, when you can see your obstacles clearly, without the distorting, magnifying lens of fear, it naturally produces the third characteristic.
Fortitude.
Fortitude. Yeah. Fortitude is mental and emotional strength. It is soundness of mind in the face of intense pressure. The preacher points back to Moses, who endured the wrath of the king of Egypt. The text says he endured as seeing him who is invisible.
So because his vision allowed him to see the invisible God, he had the fortitude to stand up to the highly visible, very angry king standing right in front of them.
Spot on. And Caleb is the absolute poster child for fortitude.
Oh, for sure.
The guy is 85 years old, and he's standing there declaring, I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. Even so is my strength now for war.
At 85 years old, he's actively asking for a mountain full of giants to conquer. That is serious mental and emotional fortress building.
And that internal fortitude, that rock-solid internal emotional state is what births the fourth and final characteristic, forthrightness.
Which is the courage to actually speak up.
Exactly. Fortitude is how you stand. Forthrightness is what you say while you are standing. Joshua and Caleb had to use their forthrightness to speak out against the vast majority.
Which is so hard to do.
Oh, incredibly hard. The 10 other spies brought a negative, fear-filled report that infected the entire nation. It takes incredible courage to be the minority voice saying, no, we can do this, when hundreds of thousands of people around you are weeping in total despair.
Yeah, the peer pressure would be immense.
Later in his life, Joshua uses this forthrightness again with his famous declaration to the nation. Choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Now, here is where it gets really fascinating. Because Pastor Malcolm didn't just leave this as an abstract ancient history lesson.
No, he brought it right to the present.
He really grounded it. He applied this desperate need for fortitude and forthrightness directly to the current context of his congregation in July 2026.
Yeah.
He notes the cultural and political shifts happening at that exact moment.
Yeah, he specifically mentions a new prime minister coming in tomorrow, and he claims this politician is just a tool in the hands of the World Economic Forum.
Now, I want to be really clear here. Regardless of where you or I might stand on the political spectrum, or our views on the WPF, Pastor Malcolm's core message to his congregation is strictly theological.
Right.
He's utilizing this moment to tell them not to put their ultimate trust in any politician, because earthly leaders come and go, but God is on the throne.
Yes. The political reference serves a very specific psychological purpose in the sermon. The human brain processes the fear of ancient giants the exact same way it processes the fear of modern economic or political instability.
That's a great point. It's all a threat to survival.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The preacher is warning his congregation against letting that external environment dictate their internal reality. He closes this thought with a very vivid, relatable metaphor about lighting. He warns against being what he calls a neon light Christian.
A neon light flickers.
Yeah.
It flashes on and off. One minute it is burning bright, and the next it is completely dark.
It buzzes, it fluctuates wildly depending on the current running through it. He equates this to a person whose internal steadiness fluctuates wildly depending on their circumstances.
Right. If things are good, they are on. If they hit the wilderness or if the culture shifts, they are off.
Yes. Instead, he urges them to be like a steady, fluorescent light shining consistently, regardless of whether they are in the majority or the minority, regardless of who the prime minister is, and regardless of the cultural climate.
Are you a flickering neon sign, or are you a steady fluorescent tube? I mean, think about how a flickering faith feels to the people around you who might be relying on your stability.
It asks the listener a very pointed question, you know. Are you letting external shifts dictate your internal steadiness? Because Joshua and Caleb maintained their steady fluorescent light for 40 years in a literal desert, completely surrounded by a complaining, fearful, neon flickering majority.
So let's pull all of this together and look at the incredible chain reaction that Pastor Malcolm unpacked from this historical text.
Yeah, let's recap.
It all starts with the foundation reclaiming that spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. It's doing that hard reset on the panic mode that is draining your battery.
Right.
Once your mind is sound, you can build faith, not just by hoping blindly, but by actively hearing, seeing, and heavily curating your memories. You hit delete on the junk files of old grievances, and you firmly save the files of past victories.
And that curated memory bank is the soil that births vision.
It allows you to put on those night vision goggles and see the invisible, giving your brain the comparative baseline to reduce giants to manageable obstacles.
Beautifully said.
And when your vision is clear, it naturally births fortitude, that fortress of mental and emotional strength to actually step onto the battlefield. And finally, that internal fortitude gives you the forthrightness to stand strong and speak the truth, even if you are the absolute minority voice in the room.
It is a profound psychological and spiritual progression. It moves from the internal state of the mind out through the processing of history into the perception of the present, and finally culminating in outward action and speech. So, thinking about all of this, what stands out to you? When you look at the challenges in your own life, when you face your own personal or professional wilderness moments right now, which of these 4 characteristics do you need to tap into the most?
That's a great question.
Is it the faith to remember, the vision to see past the giants, the fortitude to endure the pressure, or the forthrightness to finally speak up?
We talked about how remembering past victories is the absolute fuel for faith. Just like Rahab hanging that red cord out of her window based entirely on a 40-year-old story of the Red Sea parting.
Yeah.
Think about your own life right now. What red cord are you hanging in your window today based on a past victory? Are you actively curating your memories to build confidence for your future? Or are you holding onto the junk files that keep crashing your system?
That's a strong thought to leave on.
It is something to mull over as you navigate your own wilderness this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Sunday's message. If you want to watch the full sermon and previous messages, be sure to check out the YouTube channel at KCC AoG Old Town Swindon, UK. Keep asking questions, keep holding on to those victories, and we will see you next time.